You're listening to Precinct 444, a podcast network from the National Law Enforcement Museum. Today, we're bringing you an episode from Lifeline, offering a holistic wellness approach focused on supporting American law enforcement, promoting resilience, safety, and survivability. We'll hear from several members of our Officer Safety and Wellness team: Troy Anderson, Executive Director, Matt Garcia, Project Manager, and Nick Brule, Senior Project Manager, who come together to bring us an inside look at officer safety and wellness.
Hello, my name is Troy Anderson, Executive Director of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund, Officer Safety and Wellness Pillar. To give you an idea about the pillar system, our fund is broken up into three pillars, the first one being the memorial, which is to honor the fallen, and that is the fallen of those who have died in the line of duty. And that memorial is on our campus in Washington, D.C., as well as the second pillar, which is our law enforcement museum, which tells the story of American law enforcement in a way that honors the profession. The last piece, and that's the piece that I oversee, is the officer safety and wellness component. And you can find all the information that we're going to talk about here today on nleomf.org. And we'll kind of take a deeper dive. But the first thing we'll do is I really need to start out by saying that our work really couldn't be done without the federal partnerships and our corporate sponsors who allow us to get our work up and out to you folks. So the last couple of years have been particularly difficult for the vocation of law enforcement. And as we talk about wellness and we talk about safety, they both go together. And in many ways, I think that there's a separation between them. And we'll kind of talk a little bit about that today. But when we look at wellness from our OSW standpoint, we're looking at with a real holistic approach. So physical, spiritual, psychological, financial, and occupational. And really, it's about safety. As we look at safety strategies, that is a little bit different. So as we get our information from our data that we collect, our proprietary data from our mid-year and end-of-year law enforcement officer fatality reports. That data is captured through the memorial, and we're going to get into that a little bit later on and discuss how that is done and what that process looks like. But what we look at is what is killing our officers and why. And then our job in officer safety and wellness is to take that data and come up with solutions, a solutions-based approach, whether it be through podcasts or videos or different programming or research documentation, to avoid those pitfalls as we go forward and to give folks as much information as we can, because our mission is to make the vocation of law enforcement safer for those who serve and to keep names off the memorial wall. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is our flagship program in our Officer Safety and Wellness program, which is Destination Zero. So this really affords agencies an opportunity to submit their best practice programs for consideration in 5 different award categories. So those categories are general officer safety, officer traffic safety, officer wellness, comprehensive safety, and comprehensive wellness, which is a new category. And part of the reason we added that newer category is that we in officer safety and wellness started seeing a real uptick in wellness submissions. So programs that were wellness and resilience based. And by adding an additional category, it affords us an opportunity to look deeper into these programs, and it gives us more comprehensive data to share with the field, whether it be agency administrators or rank and file folks out in the field. It gives us a greater opportunity to look at these programs and showcase their good work. So the way this works is programs are submitted, they're submitted to our OSW team on a rolling basis throughout the year. Destination Zero program managers work with every agency that submits their program to ensure that they have the most comprehensive submission. Once we reach our deadline, our yearly deadline, all of those submissions are reviewed by the OSW team, and there's a very stringent review process. The finalists from those categories are then given along to our Destination Zero Awards Selection Committee. This committee is comprised of a group of individuals that are very knowledgeable leaders in law enforcement safety and wellness, and many of them have been winners themselves, so they know exactly what we're looking for, and they really take a comprehensive look at what these programs are, and from that, we now have 5 winners. So those winners are then notified, and we create, OSW team sends out a professional filmmaking production team to go to those agencies to develop a video that really showcases and highlights the agency and all of their winning program milestones and sort of achievements. That video is, of course, kept on our website for agencies around the nation to view at no charge, and it's there in perpetuity. Then the winning agencies, a representative of that agency is then brought to Washington, D.C. During Police Weekend to receive their presentation of the Destination Zero Award. And that gives us an opportunity to recognize the agency and recognize their representative as they come out, and really gives everybody a richer appreciation for the good work that's being done around this country. The last thing I'll say about this is 20 years ago, as we talk about wellness, 20 years ago, if you were to talk about wellness in a group of your colleagues at roll call or at briefing, if you talked about wellness or if you talked about seeing a therapist, you certainly, I think, would have been laughed out of the room. But what we've seen in the last several years, and maybe even in the last 20 years or so, is a real paradigm shift in the way law enforcement folks are looking at wellness and looking at safety and looking at how to take care of themselves. I think now if you were to go into a roll call and you were to talk about maybe seeing a therapist, I think that you would find that folks would be much more receptive to having that conversation and sharing those experiences. That said, stigma still exists in law enforcement, and it is undoubtedly a change-adverse culture. But that change, I think, has come up from the bottom, and some of the folks that came on years ago are now in leadership positions, and they are really creating a culture of acceptance. And I think that law enforcement administrators are recognizing that healthy and safe officers equal a healthy and safe community. And clearly, it should go without saying, but officers know that it takes a lot more courage to reach out for help than it does to suffer in silence. So I think that's sort of an overview of where we are in OSW as far as Destination Zero and as far as the philosophy of the OSW team. We're going to talk about some of these other programs that we have. We have Senior Program Manager Nick Brule, who is here to talk about his NHTSA programs and Safe Leo, and Matt Garcia, who is a project manager who is going to talk about the Ambassador program. Nick?
And I really agree with what you said about the change in law enforcement's approach to wellness, particularly mental health. And that's something we've seen through the years of Destination Zero, which really started in earnest in 2014. And this was our 7th year of giving out the Destination Zero Awards, which are actually titled the National Officer Safety and Wellness Awards. So we are really leading the nation in that regard in terms of recognizing those agencies that have really taken unique steps and created innovative programs to help their officers, whether it's keeping them tactically safe, giving them the armor they need or the training they need, enhancing their vehicle safety, or, and most importantly, which is why we ended up sort of splitting wellness into 2 categories, because there's so much going on with not only physical fitness, but supporting mental and emotional health. And you mentioned financial health. Well, that turns out to be one of the greatest stressors in law enforcement. Cops don't get paid a lot of money. And, you know, a lot of cops start out, and the next thing you know, they're starting a family, and then there's a lot of stress to make ends meet, and it's very difficult. So, but there are a lot of factors that are being dealt with in today's world. And certainly when I was on the police department, the support network that is here now, support network like Safe Leo, which I'll talk about in a moment, was not there when I was a young officer, and it was definitely a very much sort of rub some dirt on it, Johnny, and get back out there sort of atmosphere. So thankfully that has changed, and the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund has been instrumental in forwarding that change and in enacting some of that change, and certainly spreading the word about what's out there. Because if you go to destinationzero.org, you can find what all these winning agencies did in all those categories. And there are videos for almost every winner going back to 2015. And those are great, quick ways to get information about how they did what they did and what was unique about it. So I mentioned Safe Leo, which stands for Suicide Awareness for Law Enforcement Officers. And as I think most people know, suicide within law enforcement is a real problem. Some people have described it as an epidemic. And it's something that the federal government, through the Bureau of Justice Assistance and the Department of Justice, have decided to try and do something about with this program. And Safe Leo essentially is training. There are lots of resources on the Safe Leo website. If you go to valorforblue.org or just type in Safe Leo, SAFLEO, you'll find yourself at the Safe Leo website with a lot of resources. Its main, I think its mainstay and its main power lies in the training that they are providing firsthand to law enforcement agencies. Because of the pandemic, naturally, the in-person training was not being done, so there was a lot of virtual training. And Safe Leo has several tiers. It has executive leadership or executive level training, so executives can sort of get the information that they need and understand their responsibilities to their troops. Then you have first line officer supervision, so that gives a little bit of a different perspective to the sergeants and lieutenants who are out there interacting with their officers or deputies every day, and putting the onus on them to make sure they're paying attention to their personnel and that they're also addressing issues that they are recognizing or that are being brought to them through their subordinates and peers. And then the last one is line officer training, and this is a much broader training on the problems and the topic of suicide in law enforcement, as well as helping and encouraging you to help your peers and making sure that the peers get the right help, whether it be a peer support member or an EAP or a supervisor having a conversation with that individual and then, discussing what's going on and some action being taken so that those individuals can get the help that they need. So Destination Zero has a lot of mental health components in some of the submissions, and Safe Leo, of course, has a number of those as well. And I would look on the Safe Leo website for continuing information and podcasts just like this one on topics that deal directly with some of the stressors that officers face and can lead officers down that dark road. The other thing that Troy mentioned was our National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, or NHTSA, cooperative agreement. And this has been a very long-going cooperative agreement that we have with NHTSA. I started working for the Memorial Fund in 2014, and I've worked there full-time in various capacities, but I'm now a consultant. But I've been working with NHTSA on that cooperative agreement now for almost 7 years. And one of the things that NHTSA comes to the Memorial Fund for, which Troy mentioned, is data. We get the fatality data, and we get the fatality data in the forms of reports, investigative reports, crash reports, sometimes even toxicology reports, autopsies, all that kind of information, so that our organization can evaluate that submission for that name to go on the wall. But the great thing is that we want to use that information. It doesn't just go into a file. We then say, hey, we are a warehouse for all of this information, and I'm speaking specifically about crashes and struck-bys, but we get all this information as to what the circumstances were, what the time of day was the other striking driver impaired, was this a result of distraction, was this a struck-by? If it was, were they on a crash scene? Or were they making a traffic stop? We need to parse all that out so we can give NHTSA and law enforcement all of those really salient details so we can see the trends. Now, 2 years does not make a trend, but 5 years of data, I would say you could track some fairly recent trends as you're seeing the same things happening over and over again. And I'm not an academic, so I just look at what the reports show and break that down and pull out all those points. But these are really important points that NHTSA wants us to focus on. We also break all that information out for NHTSA and for everyone else according to the locations across our country. And so we can track some of the states that have higher percentages. We can also track law enforcement entities, meaning were they a sheriff department? Were they a tribal law enforcement agency? Were they municipal? Were they a state law enforcement agency? And we can see within those agencies some trends. For example, seatbelt usage is something that we're looking at across all agencies and their use. And, shockingly and sadly, and this will sort of take us into another thing I want to talk about, which is the summit we just put on. But sadly, in the latest research, in vehicle crashes involving law enforcement, 47% of the cops were not wearing their seatbelt. And there are reasons behind that, and we can discuss those. But it's something that needs to change if we're truly going to talk about safety. And then the other thing that we do at the Memorial Fund is we're willing to work with any organizations who are interested in safety and wellness. So you have lots of agencies like IACP, NSA, agencies that contribute to the Memorial Fund to keep our safety and wellness research going, like Verizon and Goodyear. And of course, I mentioned the cooperative agreement with NHTSA. So there's a lot of interest in what we're doing, and we're really making sure we bring a lot of people to the table.
Thanks, Nick. The next portion of OSW that I'm really excited about, we're all very excited about right now, is the Ambassador Program, which was recently launched on August 1st. The project manager for the Ambassador Program is Matt Garcia, and Matt is joining us here to talk a little bit more about the Ambassador Program. Matt?
The Ambassador Program had existed, it had been vibrant at one point over the years. Other things had taken priorities. There had been some changes, but we recognized the need and the importance for an Ambassador Program, and really to tap into the officers that would routinely come forward asking, what can I do? How can I be involved? How can I help? Because there's such a passion amongst our law enforcement community, our brothers and sisters out there, to really give back and give back in a meaningful way. And attaching the Ambassador Program really to officer safety and wellness, I think was a very key strategic move. And I'll explain why that I feel that was so important. So first and foremost, what we're looking for from our ambassadors out there are law enforcement officers, retired, active duty from various fields, state, municipal, local colleges, the ones on our campuses, who are in a position to either raise awareness for the memorial, to help generate funds, which would help keep the memorial going. There's actually a lot that goes into keeping the memorial up and running, so that it is presentable for all who come any day of the week or during the year. And that really becomes important when you go down there and you see the memorial and you see how well it's taken care of, and just the images, the visual images of it during the day and at night. But there's a lot that needs to be done in order to make that happen, and our ambassadors can be key in helping to make sure that we are able to keep that going by helping to generate funds for that. We also have a lot of ambassadors who are coming to us, officers from throughout the country who are expressing interest as well, who are part of their honor guard. They're part of an honor guard within their department. They've been down to Police Week, and they've taken firsthand. They have participated in either standing watch for the fallen, they've participated in the vigil, they've participated in various events. And if you've been down there and had the opportunity to be at any of those or all of those, just the emotional feelings that it brings up. Because I think for many of us down there, we know personally names that are on those walls, and we know the stories behind them. And we've had the opportunity to work with them. We've worked with them, we've laughed, we've joked with them, and now to see their name on the wall. And so to be part of that is a way for us to keep those memories going. And then when you meet the families down there and you see the families and you see them walking those grounds and just you can see it on their face, they still carry the memory every day. And the loss is so prevalent in their lives and they live it every day. Whereas we in law enforcement, our brothers and our sisters who've lost peers along the way, somewhere deep down, we understand that comes with the job. I think we understand every time we put on the uniform or put on a bulletproof vest that there's an inherent danger to the job. But to see how it plays out in the lives of the family members, the children, the spouses, it's impactful. And so our ambassadors recognize that, and they have a passion for law enforcement. They have a passion for continuing to help our brothers and sisters out there. There's really two important parts to the ambassador program that I think are incredibly relevant. One, as I've mentioned before, it's how we can help keep the memorial going, what we can do out there within our communities to help generate support for keeping the memorial going, keeping the museum up and running, because the museum is important. It tells the story. It tells the story of law enforcement in a way that honors law enforcement. Our history in law enforcement comes at us from many different angles. We've got highs, we've got lows, but the museum is there to really tell the story in a way that honors our law enforcement. That's what I find makes the museum so special and unique. And having been in law enforcement for over 2 decades, walking through that museum, what I find interesting is that there are displays in there that I remember when they occurred firsthand. I remember for me, it's not just walking through the past, but I remember when those events happened and reading about it in live time. And I find that incredibly meaningful. And so having the museum as a place to tell our story really does honor our fallen. And then the other way is through our educational component. Troy, you had mentioned how in law enforcement we're change adverse and how the things that we talk about within officer safety and wellness are things that we couldn't have talked about years ago. And Nick, firsthand too, when we first got into law enforcement, there was not a venue for us to talk about the things affecting officer wellness. I mean, we knew it. We were all aware of it. We all knew it. We knew that you could go to an incredibly tragic call, and then when that wrapped up, you could be going and dealing with somebody who's complaining about something which seems like, nonsense to us, but is significant to them. And we had to make that transition mentally and emotionally.
Yeah, no, you're right. We had choir practice, right? Cops
Yes.
had choir practice, right? And that's probably not the best way to deal with things, as we all know what choir practice was, but it was a way for somebody to talk things out, but that was all we had for sure.
Yeah, I think we're all fortunate. There's an evolutionary process to this, and I know that's what Matt's talking about. That's what we're all talking about. Really, it was, it did used to be choir practice, but now we've seen that sort of evolve into peer support and more enhanced access to chaplaincy programs and family support programs and military support programs, and so many different resources that are available along the way that just weren't back in the day.
No, it's true. And I just went through a handful of applications for the ambassador program. And when we asked, why are you interested in becoming an ambassador, they reference the Officer Safety and Wellness Program. And they reference the initiatives that are out there. There is a growing awareness, and it's been in the works for quite some time, and of the need to take care of ourselves, right? Because when the job is over, and it will end eventually for everybody. It will end, and preferably it ends on our terms. We retire and we go on to something else. But being able to enjoy life after the job is easier said than done. It can take its toll. We're aware the importance of taking care of ourselves along the way. You can't do this. This is not something you could do in the last 6 months of your career. If you've not done it along the way, then you're setting yourself up for failure going into chapter 2, as I would say. And so the ambassadors who are coming in, they're specifically citing the initiatives that we have, the programs through Destination Zero, officer wellness, peer support. Those are the programs that are resonating with a number of the applicants coming forward, and being able to share and get that information out there amongst our brothers and sisters who are still in the field. And on top of that, I think, and this comes from doing some training at the academy and speaking before police groups, we've got a generation coming up into law enforcement that are much more likely to talk about their feelings, if I may, than past generation. You know, when I got on the job, Troy, you as well, Nick, you as well, we were coming in to a generation of law enforcement where your senior officers, your real senior officers, were Vietnam vets. They were cops from the 60s. You didn't talk about these things ever. And so that's the environment that we grew up with. But the officers coming on nowadays, I do find that they're much more likely and willing to talk about these types of things. They're more open. So the environment is slowly shifting and changing. And our ambassadors, like I said, the applications that are coming in, these are officers, retired and active officers, that want to give back in that meaningful way to those who are still in the field. So I'm excited about the ambassador program. I think it's a great opportunity for us to get information out there and really have an impact on our brothers and sisters out in the field. And that is a way to honor the fallen, because what we're trying to do is the goal of Destination Zero is we want to bring that number down to zero, especially when it comes to all of the different things with traffic safety. Nick, when I was listening to the summit, it struck me, and I had mentioned this to Troy. Back in 1996, when I got on the job, our department had a policy about wearing seatbelts. And if a supervisor caught you driving around without your seatbelt, you would be called into the department and written up. And yet here we are in 2022, and we're still having discussions about the importance of wearing your seatbelt.
Yep. Yeah, it's a real shame, and it's a cultural thing in law enforcement, and I don't want to take us down the rabbit hole as we're talking about all our programs. But yeah, it's something that definitely is still an issue. And when I see them in fatal crashes, and you know, if you get a rollover with an ejection, pretty sure that officer wasn't wearing their seatbelt. And the fact is, the seatbelt being on may have saved that officer's life. And we've had several crashes where there's no question that the officer would have survived. They would have been injured, but they would have likely survived that crash had they been belted. So one thing I wanted to follow on, though, when you mentioned and talked about retirement, and this is, I think it's a perfect opportunity for retirees to look at the ambassador program, because it is really difficult to transition from being a cop to being a civilian, if you will. I hope that turn of phrase doesn't bother people, but it really is difficult. And for me, it was difficult to sort of turn it off, if you will, and then not be associated with the police department where you spent 25 years. You know, it's a little bit like not working at the factory anymore, and then one day wanting to walk in and go visit people on the line, and they're like, well, you're not an employee here, you're not welcome. So you can never go home again, as they say. But it is a great way of staying connected and staying involved in your profession. And I mean, we need it more now than ever. You know, agencies are having a lot of trouble recruiting, and there's a lot of sort of negativity towards law enforcement. I think this is a good way to not only give back, but stay involved.
And like you're saying, Nick, it's really a great opportunity for active and retired folks to kind of develop a liaison relationship with the fund as well. So they're able to exchange that information in real time, looking at the work that we're doing, looking at our trends, looking at our data, looking at our programming, bringing that out to the field, sharing that at roll call training or briefing, sharing that at recruit trainings. And then, of course, in return, bringing back information from the field as well and sharing that with us. What are they looking for? What programs are you looking for? So I think, we call this clearly an ambassador program, but I think I look at it, I look at these ambassadors in many ways as liaisons with their agencies. And I think, as you think, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the memorial, pardon me, and the data and the process for getting names on the wall. I think if you're looking at agencies that have not experienced a line of duty death or haven't experienced one in many years, that process to them clearly is foreign. So having that liaison that's on your staff that has a direct contact at the fund, that has an ability to help walk through that protocol and be able to streamline that process, I think is, anything we can do to make that more efficient, I think is better for the agency. So it really is, it's a give and take.
Yeah, no, I agree, because there's a lot of confusion, particularly with agencies that haven't done it for 10 years or have never done it there's no reason they should know how to do it. We offer guidance, but having those ambassadors there to explain the difference between PSOB, COPS, as well as what our requirements are, I think it'd be very helpful.
Oh, I
agree.
Absolutely. Because it's comforting, and especially when you're in the middle of it, to know that there's somebody out there who can provide that information, who's a direct contact to the memorial, who can help either walk you through or get the answers or point you into the right direction. As police officers, we're mission oriented. It's part of who we are, and having something to work for, or something that we can get behind and support. That drives the ambassador program. The ambassadors that we have, the applications that are coming in, these are coming in from officers and retirees and active who have that desire to continue to give back, and that's what makes them so special. And that's why our process to become an ambassador, we take very seriously. We don't just have the names coming in. We want to meet with you. We want to learn who you are, and we want you to learn who we are. We want to make sure that you understand the expectations, and we want to make sure too that as you're coming in, that you're coming in for the right reasons, because we don't want to dilute a program by just accepting every single application that comes through. And so that's why we ask, why do you want to become an ambassador? And we ask about the activities that you've been a part of. The ambassadors who have applied, they're volunteering out in their communities. They're volunteering within their departments. They're taking the initiative. They're starting things within their departments as well. And they've been involved in not just law enforcement activities. Some we've had come through have started programs within the community to really bring attention to law enforcement and help build bridges between law enforcement and the community. So it's really an incredible program with a lot of opportunity out there. Like I said, I'm very excited for the program. And then on a personal note, it allows me to continue to work with officers from throughout the country, and on a daily basis be able to talk to and see all of the good things that are being done out there, because they really are, and the ambassadors highlight those exceptional efforts out there.
Matt, one of the aspects of the ambassador program that that is just, I think, so impressive to me is the onboarding process and the way that has been broken up into different modules, to kind of give more of a general overview, but a deeper dive into the work that we do and to provide resources. Maybe you want to speak a little bit to what that looks like, so potential ambassadors can have an idea of what that onboarding process looks like.
Oh, absolutely. So the ambassador program, and there are organizations and businesses and communities that are using some type of ambassador program within their respective fields, as far as for marketing and getting brand names out there. What makes our program unique is that our mission is to honor the fallen, to tell our story, and to make it safer for those out there. And so to that, we have to make sure that we're giving our ambassadors the tools they need to carry out that mission. So our application process is once you apply, and you can go onto the website. When you go onto the website, you'll see the ambassador logo. By clicking on that logo, it will bring you to the application form. We're asking information, contact information, where you're working, who your supervisor is, and letters of references. We want to know that there are those standing behind you that feel that you are indeed someone who is going to represent your respective department. As Troy had mentioned, these are liaisons, and we want to know that either your department or your past department, your current job, they're behind you. They support you on this. And then you will, after we review your application, you'll have an opportunity to meet with our selections committee during an interview, and we get an opportunity to meet with you. And it's about a half-hour interview, and really this is a way for us to get to know a little something about you in your own words, not just what's on paper. And you get to know about us, and you get to ask questions for us. Once you're through the interview process, there is training. So if you're selected, we will put you through an onboard training. And the training is going to describe for you and give you the tools you need to know about being an ambassador for the Law Enforcement Memorial, what that entails, what that means, the standards that we put forth, because we want to make sure that every officer out there, retired and active, who represents the memorial is doing so in a way that is honorable. Because our name is attached to you and your name is attached to us. And we want that relationship to be strong. And so we want to make sure that right from the onset that the standards and the expectations are out there. We also give you the tools necessary to teach you how to raise the funds needed to help with the memorial. We have ambassadors that come to us. Their skill set is within teaching and education and putting together programs. And we have others that come to us and say, hey, listen, I've got a contact within these businesses. What do I do? Well, we want to be able to tell you what you can do, as far as helping to generate support. We've talked about, ambassadors come from all different skill sets, and we want to make sure that it's known through our onboarding process that there isn't one skill that we're looking for. It's sort of open. We want to capitalize on all of those different skill sets that are offered to us. And so when we have ambassadors come to us that have contacts, they've worked with companies and businesses before, we want to be able to point them in the right direction for that. Then we want to go into the three pillars. Troy had mentioned the three pillars: the museum, the memorial, and officer safety and wellness. And we want to give an overview of what that is, because the three pillars are really key to the whole memorial. It's not just one. We all support one another. We're all intertwined. And when one is thriving, the others are thriving. We want to make sure that our ambassadors coming in understand that this is all encompassing. And then we have as part of our onboarding, we go into depth about the officer safety and wellness programs. And we've talked about NHTSA and Destination Zero and Safe Leo. And those really resonate with our ambassadors, as we see through the applications coming in and the ambassadors on our steering committee, because it's through those initiatives and programs that we find this gives them the tools they need to speak before various committees, whether it be before commanders, chiefs of police, sheriffs, or just in the community. What we find is we're giving them the tools needed so that they have the information to share. Roll call training. We have information there that can be played in roll call, meaning that a video clip under 5 minutes that can pass information on about not just officer safety, but within the Safe Leo. How does a department, or what do you do after your department has suffered a suicide? What comes next? That's not something that's typically thought about. But we have that. We have that within our Safe Leo program, information on what to do when it comes next. And so there's a lot of information in there, and we want to make sure that our ambassadors, when they come through the onboarding process, they're aware of what's in there, the information that's available, so that when the time arises, they know that we have provided them the tools to share with their departments, with their colleagues, and even with other departments. In our rural, and really in our rural parts of the country, you're talking about small departments that may not have access to the resources that our larger departments have. But this is a great way when we talk about liaisons. A large department, my department with Connecticut State Police, we were roughly around 800 to 900 sworn officers, but we had access to larger departments. We had access to departments all over the Northeast. But if you take a rural department in the middle of the country that has maybe 10 to 15 officers, what's out there for them? Now, if we have a liaison between the ambassador program and that department, well, they have access to everybody we do. They have access to every program that we have. They have access to all of our information. And now they're not so small. It's a way to make sure that they have the support that they need. And especially in a time of crisis, when we're not necessarily able to think of all of the different things that have to be considered in a line of duty death. That liaison, that ambassador, is able to help walk the department through the process to make sure that they are receiving information and access to resources that are going to help with either everything from planning the funeral to what comes next after the funeral, what benefits are out there for the family. And then, as we mentioned before, how does a name go on the wall? It doesn't just happen automatically. There's a process, and making sure that they understand the process. So there's so many roles that ambassadors can play, and we make sure through the onboarding process that they are aware and they understand that, and they have that knowledge and information. And then the last thing I just want to say about that is the onboarding process is not a one and done. We have quarterly trainings to make sure that new information is out there, and that the ambassadors are continuously learning either the initiatives or what's being done at the memorial. And then anything new, if there's any new legislation coming up, we want to make sure that they have the information. So we want to keep them educated. And in doing so, it's going to help the program thrive.
Thank you, Matt. I agree. I would just like to take a minute to thank Nick Brule and Matt Garcia for joining us and so eloquently talking about their work to give the folks out in the field a much greater understanding about the work that we're doing and the importance of that work, and let everybody know that we are here to support you. We are here for you, and we are a resource, and we are a contact for you. At any time, please reach out to our Officer Safety and Wellness team. You can contact us through nleomf.org. Thank you.
Thanks to Troy Anderson, Matt Garcia, and Nick Brule for their ongoing efforts to support officer safety and wellness, and for offering today's program. Thanks also to Christopher Mitchell, our Manager of Digital Content and Strategy, for producing today's episode. And many thanks to you for listening to this episode of Lifeline, a Precinct 444 podcast from the National Law Enforcement Museum. We hope you enjoyed this episode and will join us again for more content from Lifeline. Please subscribe to Precinct 444 on your favorite podcasting platform to stay connected and to receive our latest content as soon as it drops. And we would love to hear from you. Send in your questions, comments, and feedback to precinct444@nleomf.org. You can help us make our content even better. The National Law Enforcement Museum is located at 444 East Street Northwest in Washington, D.C., and is dedicated to telling the story of American law enforcement. We expand and enrich the relationship between law enforcement and the community through educational journeys, immersive exhibitions, and insightful programs. Find us online at lawenforcementmuseum.org. Until next time, stay safe. We'll see you at the precinct.